Good morning, viewer. Welcome to our Fosak TV. Here's a breaking news. Yes, science at last explain our soul. The Australian biologist Jeremy Griffith has provided the long-awaited first principle biological explanation of the human condition, our capacity for so-called good and evil, with the clarifying biological explanation for why we humans became competitive, selfish, and aggressive. It is now possible to look into and explain the rather elusive concept we refer to as our soul, our species' instinctive memory of a time when our distant ancestors lived in a cooperative, selfish, loving, innocent state, or as it is referred to metaphorically in the religious context of the Christian Bible, humanity's time in the Garden of Eden. Not all scientists are necessarily adverse to grappling with religious concepts. Recently, two quantum scientists have claimed that they can prove the existence of the soul, a quantum entity that acts as the program for the computer of our brain and exists independently of the physical body after death. One psychologist says that the concept of soul is merely an extrapolation we make based on the duality that we experience between body and consciousness. Neurobiologists and evolutionary psychologists hold that the soul, or at least a belief in it, evolved as an adaptation to bestow on the individual either an equanimity or social trustworthiness that ultimately represented a comparative advantage. Jungian psychoanalysts relate the concept of soul to the concept of the collective unconscious. Carl Jung himself described the collective unconscious as a psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature which is identical in all individuals. This collective unconscious does not develop individually but is inherited. The Australian biologist Jeremy Griffith goes further and suggests that not only is our collective unconscious inherited, but it is in fact a genuinely altruistic instinctive orientation. This, he says, is the source of our moral guidance, the voice of which is our conscience and which we have learned to call our soul. Griffith says that having a selfless instinctive orientation is a truth that humanity could not admit to until we could first explain the crass problem on earth of the human condition, the dilemma of our capacity for so-called good and evil. This dilemma has troubled the human mind since we first became fully conscious. Thinking begins, are humans essentially good? And if so, what is the cause of our evil, destructive, insensitive, and cruel side? Until this could be explained, and humans defended admitting to a selfless instinctive heritage has simply been too confronting of our present selfish and destructive state. Griffith has at last explained the human condition, and it turns out the explanation is simple. Our brains are made up of two different learning systems. One is a gene-based system, our instincts, a learning system we share with all other animal species, while the other is a nerve-based system, our conscious intellect, which is unique to us humans. When our intellect began to develop and challenge our already well-established instincts for control of our mind, a terrible battle broke out between these two learning systems, the effect of which was the extremely competitive, selfish, and aggressive state that we call the human condition. With the defense of our aggressive, selfish state established, Griffith says that it is now safe to admit that we have selfless instincts and to explain that they were instilled in our primate ancestors through a process he calls love. Indoctrination, our ancestors lived in condition conductive and conducive to extending the period that their offspring spent in infancy, and there was an opportunity for selection for greater and more intense levels of maternalism, where a mother protects her offspring in order to ensure the survival of her own genes. This combination of an extended nurturing infancy and more maternal mothers then resulted in dependent infants, in effect being trained in selfless behavior, because to an observer such as a child, the mother maternalism appears to be selfless behavior. She appears to be giving her offspring food, warmth, shelter, support, and protection for apparently nothing in return from her infant's perspective. This is real. Unconditional love, and the infant's brain is being doctrinated in that behavior. Graves says that if you apply this training across all the members of the group, the result is an unconditionally selflessly behaved, cooperative, fully integrated society. And then with this training in unconditional selflessness occurring over many generations, the unconditionally selfless behavior will become instinctive. A moral soul will be established, and our genes will inevitably follow and reinforce that development process. Graves cites religious texts and classical and modern literature to support his theory. Most scientists attempt to disenfranchise arts and religion as legitimate sources of insight into the human condition. For example, in his latest book, The Social Conquest of Art, U. Wilson says that the intricate distortions of the mind may be transmitted by the arts in fine detail, but they are constructed as though human nature never had an evolutionary history. Their powerful metaphors have brought us no closer to solving the riddle than did the dramas and literature of ancient Greece. With regard to religion, Wilson says bluntly, religions can never solve the riddle. The creation myth is a Darwinian device for survival. However, Graves says it makes sense that the works of art, philosophy, and religion that have resonated down through the ages have done so, not because they were survival tools, but because they contain profound truth about our condition. For example, Graves says the following lines from Wordsworth or a intimation of immortality from recollections of early childhood. Cooperative humans have altruistic instincts which Wordsworth equates with the heavenly state, which are then later buried by our consciousness. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life stir, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory to do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Graves also find correlation in the metaphor of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve taking the fruit of the tree of knowledge, a story central to the Abrahamic tradition, arguing that it contains the same truths as those expressed by Wordsworth, that we have a selfless, instinctive heritage, and that an emerging consciousness later came into conflict with our instinctive state. With the scientific explanation of the human condition now found, these texts are revealed to be profound, which is not surprising because we have always been aware of our condition. May end this report for Shakti.